full story.
Welcome back. You're watching Standpoint here on Morning Prime. We continue with the conversation regarding the politics of housing levy and the Finance Bill 2023. The 26th of May was the last chance that you had to submit your proposal if you had any or taking issues with the Finance Bill. But it seems also Kenya Kwanza is particularly intent to make sure that it is steamrolled as is, according to the legislators who are saying, of course, this is hugely beneficial and exceedingly beneficial for Kenyans, especially the housing levy. And this is what we are discussing this morning. Just to wind up on it, I'd asked about the standard levy itself because this is whipped up from 1999, an old levy by Kenya Bureau of Standards that seeks to tax the hustlers. When we're talking about photocopiers, we're talking about tailors, we're talking about fabricators, we're talking about the artisans, Jokali artisans in Kamukunji, where you have the largest constituents of artisans, I think, in the country, as I mentioned. That is Kamukunji. Don't you think this is punitive to the hustlers themselves? On top of that, you add the housing levy. We have the fuel tax that is.
If you look at the taxation level in Kenya, if you look at the taxation level in Kenya on GDP, compared to many countries, the level of taxation is very low at 14%. Other
compared to many countries, which countries are
22 to 25%. And why tax? You tax to deliver services to the same people. And this debate of the taxation is so high, it's so low, it's so high. I don't think it's anything that really we have to be debating if we expect reciprocal services from government. But that said, back on the housing levy, because I think we really need to exhaust this. Let me correct something from Okongo Omogeni. When the president met teachers, and is a National Executive Council of NAT, 50 of them on Thursday, National Governing Council of KUPPET, 47 of them on Saturday. And if you are trying to pick certain negative aspects of a feeling of one or two to say yes, there was no agreement, I think it is misinformation. I can inform you authoritatively of Okongo Mugeni, there were clear agreements. And of course, the Secretary Generals will communicate. And this is part of the continuous engagement of the President with the workers, because the contributors are workers. Yeah, there have been deep engagement with central organizations of trade union. And you know the Central Organization of Trade Union is now supporting the housing levy very seriously. And teachers' unions, so far as we speak, are supporting the same. Now, let's come back. Is this a tax, a levy, or a contribution?
But I want to discount. No, before you go there, I want to know. I want to discount what you really said, that Kenyans are not really some of the highly taxed.
Allow me.
No.
Allow me.
But I can't just let that particular point without you correcting you, because looking at the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, a recent report there, it says Kenya is among the most difficult countries for a company to pay taxes, according to global survey by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Paying taxes, it says that the average tax rate, the number of taxes, and the time it takes a company in Kenya to comply, the three key measures used in the report, are all higher than the global average. The report found that a company in Kenya on average pays a total tax rate of 44.2%, slightly higher than the 43.1% global average. Firms operating locally on the average have to pay 41 types of taxes against 26.7 global average. And while it takes a firm operating locally 308 hours to comply with taxes, the global average is 268 hours. This is it's not a very new report as well, but it it's compounded to be worse since then.
That's another item for discussion.
No, that's factual.
I'm just coming to that fact that you're saying that
let me come back.
We're the list compared to other countries.
No, you've picked a segment of an item, but you were talking about taxation in general.
That's
right?
a fact. Sossion.
But is in that taxation that we're talking about?
On the same, and on taxation.
But I'm refuting that point that you say is generally that we're not highly taxed.
No. The taxation is very low in Kenya. Now,
so
Debal, let's get back to the same. How much do we evade taxes in Kenya? There's a lot of tax evasion running into billions of shillings, and that is why there is need to digitalize the revenue collection at KRA. But let's leave that. Let's talk about the housing levy. We are on the housing levy, and allow me to ventilate on the same. I've answered Omogeni on the issue of unions, and unions are properly in this. And when you look at the issue of domestic borrowing, so that we are not saying yes, the housing levy is being raised so that the government can borrow to service other things. The standard practices, look at the Asian tigers, Singapore, Malaysia, and the rest. And in fact, when you get to Singapore, the housing plan is excellent. Malaysia, the same. Housing provision for working men and working people and the citizens is guaranteed. And remember, Singapore and Malaysia borrowed and benchmarked from us. We cannot be a country that generates ideas, but we cannot implement. This is not right, Debal. And therefore, the 3% contribution from workers is not a tax, is not a levy, it is a contribution. It is your share in the scheme. And the matching contribution of 3% from the employer is mandatory. And this is where employers are crying. They don't want to contribute the matching contribution for the workers, which is not right. As a labor leader, the employer has a moral responsibility to contribute a margin contribution. And we cannot allow employers to give excuses that they cannot invest, they will run away simply because they don't want to contribute 3%. If you are utilizing services of workers, then you must contribute for all their social benefits. NSSF, Debala, 200 shillings per member. That could not guarantee any worker even good, decent retirement benefits. But now the elevation to 6% can. And Kenya has been analyzed that Kenyan workers retire into poverty and debt because of poor savings. So if you look at savings across the board, NSSF at 6% will form a very strong revenue base that government will borrow. This is what you call domestic borrowing. And when you are borrowing for development, you borrow from the social savings. And those social savings will earn interest. That is how many economies have grown. We must accept that. And so if 3% is being raised for purposes of purchasing and supporting housing in perpetuity, that it will be provided forever. Even if it is going to be a Kenyan population of 200 million, it shall be provided. Now, baptizing it to look like is a tax is a mistake. This is a contribution. The way workers are also contributing to the Provident Fund. Teachers are now contributing 7% to the Provident Fund. And TSC, as the employer, is paying 7.5%. Civil servants, the same. These are social schemes that are meant to cushion the workers. And contributing to build houses, whether you get a house or you don't get, is a noble thing. What are the benefits in terms of the exit for the contributors? You get double the payment after 14 years, if you so wish, if you don't get a house, or it can be transferred to a pension. Those are key things. And therefore, the issue of discussing about the housing, whether it will go to court or whatever, is a non-issue. the most important thing is that, do we need this housing scheme in this country? Yes. And it is almost being agreed. And this conversation must go on. It must continue.
Thank you.
Those who want to get court interpretation are free to do so.
Right.
Those who want to continue discussing the same are also free to do so. The other question, should it be voluntary or compulsory? A social scheme that is drawn from social solidarity cannot be optional. That one, it will be a big mistake. So this discussion of saying, no, let it be optional, then it ceases to be a social solidarity scheme. Social solidarity schemes are made mandatory. If it is housing, it's mandatory for everyone. If it is NHIF, it is mandatory for everyone, because it's going to protect, it's meant to protect everyone, every citizen within the boundary of the Republic of Kenya is a potential beneficiary. So from the social solidarity framework and policy, it must be compulsory. So these are the arguments that the other group of Azimio who don't want this thing to succeed, because it's in the hands of another government, of arguing that it must be voluntary, and they'll go and argue in court. It's not right.
Thank you.
It must be absolutely mandatory.
Thank you.
And when you talk of 1,000 petitions, we can even have 1,000 petitions against one petition opposing it. But that doesn't mean the majority are right. No, it doesn't mean. This is a government bill that is meant to implement the development agenda. And within this finance bill, there are also very good tax breaks for the citizens. There are a lot of good tax breaks. But trying to build a mountain out of a noble project like the housing,
thank you,
and trying to pass that,
thank you, Sossion, thank you,
not right. And then lastly, Debal, the employers. Employers are investors. They are making profit out of citizens. And if they are making profit out of citizens and their workers, they cannot blackmail the government that because this will be additional taxation, there will be flight out of the country. In fact, all this mobilization of resources means the business environment will be very vibrant. And therefore, employers should not blackmail government. It should not blackmail workers. It should prepare to give its part of the contributory part of 3% for housing for all the workers under their payroll, without necessarily also threatening of reducing the number of workers or laying off workers. That will not be right. We want to grow this economy.
Thank you.
And the whole of this
finance bill
and tax
You've made your point. Thank you. Thank you. You've made your point. I want us just to wind up on this because I think we've beaten it down to the ground.
Debal, just
we go to other issues as well.
You know, Debal, I hope Sossion is not one of the economic advisors of the president, because you are going to lead the president. You're going to mislead the president. You know, investors will look at the taxation regime that a country has. Even this pay-as-you-earn, which I'm not opposed to. I'm okay paying 35%. But you know, if I'm an investor and I want to come to East Africa, I look at the taxation rate in the now we are about 6 East African countries. Pay-as-you-earn, I want to dispel this assertion by Sossion that we are one of the lowest countries in terms of taxation.
Yes.
Pay-as-you-earn, Tanzania is 30%. Let's give the basics. Forget about your detailed report. Pay-as-you-earn in Tanzania is 30%. Pay-as-you-earn in Rwanda is 30%. Remember that Qatar Airways did a study where to set their hub between Kenya and Rwanda. And they made a strategic decision not to set their hub here, but went to Rwanda. So the taxation measures that a government puts in place can inspire economy or it can make it stagnate. So as you make these taxation measures, Debal, you must think what will be the impact in terms of attracting investors to our country. If you make it very oppressive, like what you have read for us, 44%, you will not attract any investors and you will not spur the economy. There will be no growth of our economy, Debal. And then talking about the hustler, you know, you threw in a statement whether this finance bill is meant to hurt the hustler. Yes, it does. Mheshimiwa, as a business people in Isili, under Uhuru Kibaki, they had an exemption. If you make a turnover of 1 million, Uhuru Kenyatta had said you are a hustler, I will not touch you. I will not tax you. What the Hood administration has done is now to go after the hustler. They have reduced that bracket down to 500,000. So people in Kamukunji traders, they should know that under the Hood administration, if you have a turnover of 500,000, you will be taxed. M-Pesa, people are doing business, and these are the small-scale traders. Their transaction per M-Pesa, they were being charged 13% on M-Pesa transaction. That tax is now being raised to 15%. Again, is it going to what? It's going to what the hustler down there. Look at petrol. Under the previous regime, Debal, to cushion traders, the small-scale trader, the hustler, the government had just put 8% VAT on fuel, petrol, diesel, kerosene. What is the Hood administration proposing? To hurt the hustler? It's proposing to increase VAT on petrol, kerosene, diesel by another 8% to make it 16%. And that's going to hurt the hustler. But the Bwanyenye, the rich person, is being cushioned. If you are a rich person importing goods from outside, you are transporting them via railway to Nairobi, the Hood administration is telling you we are here to protect the big person. They have reduced the levy, the rail transportation levy from 2% to 1%. That tells you that this government cares more about the rich and it's hurting the poor. Finally, you know, this rent levy or rent tax, I'll compare it with what the colonialists introduced in Kenya. Was it called the hut tax, which called for a lot of resistance and uprising from Kenyans, because you are raiding the income of poor people, taking away their money without really seeing a benefit. Because if you want to tax people from
let him finish.
a levy, please.
No, let him finish. You get a chance.
I gave you your time. I know part of the
tax.
I know part of.
I think.
No. Please allow me. Allow me to
just a moment, Sossion, so that
really define
to break it down for you.
Please,
you know,
let him finish.
If you have a hustler business person who is doing business and he gets into problems with KRA, do you know what the Hood administration is proposing? They are telling them we don't want hustlers to disturb us when we come for you. They are proposing that before you go to the tax appeals tribunal, you look for an equivalent 20%. You deposit first before you are given a hearing. How can you be a government that is denying Kenyans access to justice? I mean, if you read our constitution, we have said there should be access to justice. You should allow Kenyans, if I have a dispute, I should go to an impartial arbiter, put forth my case, you listen to me and make a verdict. But what this finance bill is proposing is actually to put brakes on anybody who wants to go to an established tribunal and seek arbitration and get a decision that will address his concerns. We are telling them, pay an equivalent of 20%. If you did business, you went to a county, you are a hustler, you did a contract of 5 million, before we listen to your dispute, you pay 20%.
Thank you.
This finance bill, Debal, when you hear Kenyans protesting again, it is because it's going to hurt the common mwananchi more than it's going to hurt
Thank you.
The Sossions of this world, the Yusuf or the Omogenis.
Thank you, Omogeni. I wanted just to ask you, Yusuf, because you're talking about the good, the bad, could be maybe the ugly as well in the finance bill. What do you think about the wealthy Kenyans and politicians importing helicopters and planes who will be exempted or they'll get at cheaper prices after President William Ruto's administration proposed to scrap 3 taxes on aircraft and parts at a time when the of course Treasury plans to hit the middle class with higher fuel prices being mentioned and salary taxes to fund the 3.59 trillion budgets, because we have the government proposing to exempt importers of aircraft, especially choppers, from paying the 16% value-added tax while scrapping the 3.5% import declaration fee and the 2% railway development levy that we have Okongo Omogeni talking about, and the major beneficiaries of buy of aircraft not exceeding 2,000 kilograms or tons, 2 tons, and helicopters of less than 2 tons, and aircraft of more than 2,000 kilograms. And this will come as a major boost to the aviation industry, of course. But if we look at the helicopter or the chopper owners in this country, who are they?
The rich.
Well, you're looking at
mostly the politicians,
yes.
No, you're looking
including the president himself.
Well, that's one element of looking at it. And I also thought maybe when I first saw that exemption, I saw that particular point.
Yes.
But in the explanation why they have done this, there's the other element that, in fact, we're a major aviation center in the region. And the aviation industry provides employment. It spurs our air industry. And the argument was that there was too much taxation in this particular industry that was driving some of the players in that particular area to other neighboring countries like Uganda or Tanzania, or even Ethiopia, which has established a very strong aviation service sector. So I think in some ways, if that is the intention, it is not subsidizing the rich because or the people who use the helicopters, but also it's trying to help nurture this particular industry. And if that is the intention, then it's good for our industry. It creates employment. It keeps this particular industry in our country, and it helps to grow our economy. But there are many other elements.
But looking at the cascading
where
effect,
we haven't touched on, which I think the government really should look at in terms of reducing its expenditure. And one good example is the point that you raised, where the budget of the Office of the President has been increased considerably, where there is more people are employed for non-existent positions like CAS, for example, when in our constitution there is no place for CAS officials. We have burdened the country with 52 plus CAS officers who are paid salaries. If we look into those areas, we can reduce the burden on the national taxpayer, and we can justify what the government is doing. But in my particular observation, there are also some good elements of the financial bill that are not looked into. For example, there's a reduction, lowering of tax on maize, cassava, wheat, and other staple foods. There's a lowering of taxes on a number of issues that touch on local people, ordinary people. And some of those things are also positive when you look into the financial bill. So I'm just saying that if you just look at the financial bill as a problem, then obviously we're going to lose a lot of positive things that would have impacted on the lives of ordinary people. So let's balance it. Let's look at the good elements and support those good parts of the financial bill, and let's review and amend the other parts that would negatively impact on ordinary people and have adverse effect on our economy.
Right, thank you. Let's just wind up.
What about why would they even tax? You know, imagine poor children have been getting milk without VAT. Now the government, led by our brother, President Ruto, is introducing 16% VAT on milk meant for infants. Poor children, who does not want to take care of a future generation? How can you really, a government that cares for the hustler, introduce VAT on milk meant for poor children? How can you introduce VAT on Kenyans who want to buy stoves? You say if you want to buy a stove now, if you import a stove, we're introducing 16% VAT, so that the poor person down there does not afford a stove. I mean, when you look at the policies on this finance bill, it's just meant to finish the hustler, mwananchi, down there. And you didn't get any reasonable explanation on the helicopters. It's simply because the rich, who are the majority of the old administration, want to cushion themselves. That's why they have put that exemption. If you asked me, those are the people who should be taxed, so that the children who are getting milk get milk without 16% VAT. Not the other way around. What justification with this economy, Debal? Why should you be taxing, putting 16% VAT on milk, maziwa ya mtoto, meant for children? This bill is a bad thing. This finance bill is a bad thing.
Yeah, Debal, I think we can always cherry pick what is controversial and paint it negative to bastardize the finance bill. At the end of the day, taxation must be executed. Revenue must be collected and services must be delivered. Reciprocal to the taxes that are collected. And so, talking about the finance bill, this is the first finance bill of Kenya Kwanza government that is aligned to the plan to be able to deliver on the various pillars. And there are, of course, five very strong pillars. One is agriculture. If you look at taxation on agricultural goods, it has been brought down. And there will be further subsidy in fertilizers to stimulate agricultural production and protect farmers. That's a key thing. People are not picking about it. You pick on the helicopters and you're trying to make it look very negative. But let's look at Kenya in terms of global communication hub. This is a country that is a communication hub globally and in the region. And we cannot close it by destroying aviation. In fact, government should go further to open the airspaces so that we have more planes and unlimited flights and movement in the country. Because we need to get even more tourists. We are getting 1.4 million tourists against a population of 50 million Kenyans. Yet we have very many diverse tourist products. And we need to expand this. For tourism to be economical, we must get 50% of the national population as guests annually. We cannot do that when we are closing down aviation. You look at helicopters as only properties of the rich. So it's like some people are being, as has been stated by Mheshimiwa here, we must open up aviation. We must open up aviation and allow more free movement across the country. And with time, when tourism will blossom, and it's another master plan of Kenya Kwanza, we get more numbers. When you get more numbers, we must allow a versatile and facilitated movement through opening up aviation with more airports across the country. That is within the transport and infrastructure framework. There is no economy that grows where you limit transport. But now, when you look at other,
let me ask you, but airports and aircraft parts, that's dramatically two different things.
No, even when you talk, let's restrict even to helicopters and aircraft alone. If you zero rate the VAT, then it means you are allowing more investors to come in, and you are encouraging the use of the same facilities. And in fact, if the airspaces are opened with high taxation, then it's not going to make sense. And Debal, look at Kenya now. Movement by air transport is the next thing for a certain category of people in Kenya, particularly if we are talking about 20 million tourists. How are you going to move those tourists if you don't open up the aviation? That is one area that needs to be opened in this country.
How is it getting down to the hassle?
If you need, no, Debal, allow me to finish because you've not interfered with Omogeni. You want to poke on what, let's be fair. Now, the other aspects, there are also other tax breaks, Debal. Like when you are waiving gas and you're encouraging all households to shift from firewood and charcoal to gas, which is cheap. I think that's a bold step, even in terms of the general global strategy of climate change. And the other tax waiver is on the rentals and agricultural input and many others. If you look at the finance bill, if you look at the finance bill, it is a balanced bill that gives citizens the Wanjiku a lot of tax breaks where necessary, and is of course taxing the rich. The fundamental principle always is that tax the rich and give the tax breaks to the poor.
So
when you talk of
rental,
35%, yes.
What did you say on
reduction from 10% to 7.5%.
Again, the rich.
Yes.
But look at internet, Debal.
Now,
internet.
No, don't interfere.
Internet is being reduced from is being reduced from 20 to 15 to cushion the rich.
Yes.
Who uses internet?
No, it's not cushioning the rich.
It's the rich.
It's to facilitate business.
Money transfer.
It is part of the internet connectivity.
Part of the digital economy.
ICT pillar pillar number 3. It's pillar number 3 that is meant to facilitate the digital economy. We saw the president on Friday in Embu, and there are spots where people can use internet for free. It is the next big thing.
But you are taxing the excellent, the young people.
Finish. Protect me.
Right, let him finish,
this chance. This is not an homogeny show. We must always...
Thank you.
Yes. Now, there is taxation also of imported goods, because we have had goods being imported, manufactured out of the country, shoes, clothes, cosmetics, and all others, that actually destroys the domestic production. You are talking about lack of sugar. We must promote sugarcane farmers within the country. You're talking about cotton farmers. If we are talking about clothes, we must promote manufacturing. That is one of the key pillars.
Thank you.
And so taxing imported goods is one step of protecting the internal manufacturing. And so overall, the finance bill will promote agricultural production. It will promote the micro, small, medium enterprises. It will promote the digital economy. And the other pillar of housing is a key thing. So what Omogeni team are trying to do is to destroy the Kenya Pillar Plan, on which Kenya Kwanza, that is what you are attempting, and it's a futile attempt. And lastly, Dibal, and this now goes to President Uhuru Kenyatta. In his term of 10 years, of which part of the Azimio leadership and the Azimio, they become partakers of the entire misrule of Uhuru Kenyatta. The taxation, the loans of 9.2 trillion, what did it do in this country? It did nothing. It was blundered. And on top of it, the so-called the money that was put in for food and the rest, it still went into waste. So really, all this taxation and borrowed money and loans that have matured all these loans must be paid through taxation. So Kenyans must accept to pay the loans. We must collect taxes. That's a fact. And all these taxes are loans that have matured, the loans that were borrowed and wasted by the
listening to Sossion Ashada when he will be the president of this country. Yeah.
That's a fact.
Those pronouncements will be made very categorical without batting an eyelid.
Kenyatta is very active around the corner trying to disrupt this government.
He's not here to defend himself.
That's a fact.
Just, all right. Okay. I want to just to orient our thoughts to other discussions.
The only thing he didn't mention, just 1 minute.
As we finish.
The only thing he didn't mention on housing project. Uhuru did housing project, but he never put that 3% levy on any Kenyan. It was done. So the question you should be asking.
It was actually. It was. We had a mandatory levy, and it was changed in between. But we did have.
There was a 3%, I think.
A proposal which was
even
shelved.
the bill was passed.
It was
shelved.
Yeah, it was shelved. The point I'm making
we don't find out why was it shelved.
It was shelved.
Why was it shelved?
There was consultation.
Let me inform you because that affected labor.
Please.
Just a moment, Sossion. Let him make his point.
Without the margin contribution from employers.
Sorry, I have to bat in.
There was no framework.
Let him finish.
That's why it died. But this one, there is a framework.
So there was no framework. That's why. Okay, let's listen. What did you want to say?
The point I wanted to make is that
the housing
project was successfully implemented by retired President Uhuru Kenyatta without taxing any Kenyan, and that's how you do it. You set aside money as a government, build the houses, and then put in place a framework of making them affordable to the poor Kenyans. And we should not be talking about this price of. Honestly, speaking as a leader, you should not be talking about offering those houses at 5-point-something million. This should be a plan where the government is cushioning the people living in Kamukunji. Not what they want to do now.
Those houses are
that they will be up for mortgages.
Not 5 million. They are much lower than that.
Yeah. So
It
we
is
need
not
we
5
need those
million.
houses to look
Where are you
at.
getting
First
these
of all,
figures
the
from
bar.
again?
Let's understand our economy. Let's understand
not accurate.
the
You know,
income.
Dibal.
You know,
Let him
sorry.
finish. Just let him finish, then you can discount his points.
No, I'm telling you the
So-
facts.
It's misleading.
Dibal,
Yeah,
let's
you'll
look
get-
at
you'll
how
get a
many
chance to
Kenyans are living on less than $1. What is the income of this Kenyan who is in the slum that we want to build houses for? And then as a government, come up with a scheme where you set aside money to come up with a housing unit like it was done in Kibera, where you saw former Prime Minister Raila Odinga move the people from slums to those houses, not what is being proposed here. But you had mentioned about rental tax. Again, it just tells you that this taxation cares about the rich. The people who own houses are being protected by the proposals in the finance bill. The tax on rental income is being reduced from 10% to 7.5%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now,
Okay.
on money transfer, the hustler uses M-Pesa. The tax on M-Pesa is being increased from 12% to 15%. The Sossions of this world do their transactions on money transfer. You transfer 1 million from one bank to the other. Tax for those Kenyans, those rich Kenyans, is being reduced from 20% down to 15%. I'm trying to answer the question you raised. This finance bill is meant to hit the hustler, common mwananchi, and cushion the rich.
So you're talking about the RTGS that is...
Yeah, the RTGS. That one tax is being reduced.
It's being reduced, but for the M-Pesa, that's...
Is there a Mama Mboga or a Boda Boda who goes to a bank to do RTGS? No. Are there rich people in government who walk to banks and do RTGS? They do it every day. Those ones are being cushioned. Tax is being reduced from 20% to 15%. Mama Mboga who does the M-Pesa every day.
Thank you.
Now,
tax is being increased.
No, we're coming to Mheshimiwa.
No, he's talking about...
No, it's Mheshimiwa. Can we just go sequentially? I wanted just to ask, is there any... Because this was not truly evidently showcased in the manifesto, the housing levy. Of course, there was housing, but the levy bit we were not really told about from the manifesto. That is a technicality, of course, that comes later with the manifesto. So you just have the bare minimums. But I was wondering, the maintaining and leaving of PS Hinga within the housing sector while other sectors were reshuffled, was this to steamroll this particular housing levy? Because this began in Uhuru's administration and we saw it was shelved. But now it is being picked and steamrolled by the same principal secretary.
Well, the housing project, the housing policy has moved from the Jubilee government to this particular government. Even Azimio had the same similar housing policy. Yes. And it had expressed, Raila Odinga had expressed quite a number of times that it will be funded through a levy. Mm-hmm. Because this country simply does not have the means to build those houses with its own resources. We are over indebted. We cannot raise our debt ceiling. And the only way we can provide decent housing to our people is through a housing fund. And that's why Hinga, who already had started the successful housing program, which was stopped in the middle by the previous government, was retained because he has an institutional memory. He comes from that, has that expert and background. And I think there's really not a big argument that, in fact, we should help pay for a housing project that would uplift the standard of living and eradicate slums and informal settlements in our country. Without a successful housing program, we're not going to develop as a country. And the only way we can do that, as I said earlier, was through borrowing, through loans, which we're not able to do, or through grants from well-wishers like donors. Now, this particular program has moved the argument to the center by saying, why should we not pay for ourselves? Why should we not build our own? For example, I can tell you recently there was an incident in Ethiopia where Ethiopia wanted to build a big grand dam on the Nile River.
The Renaissance dam.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All the donors withdrew their support from that particular project because it was a controversial project. The Ethiopian government funded it through a water fund in which they were able to collect $5 billion. And that particular project has been completed, and Ethiopia is able to supply cheap electricity to its population and sell power to the neighboring countries. So I think in this particular case, housing is one of the major pillars of our development. This particular housing fund would be contributed by the salaried workers who pay 2.5%. The other percentage is going to be paid by the employers. And this is a social responsibility in which they are contributing to the well-being of their own staff and the future of that particular employee. And in that case also, we support the development of a housing. In my particular case, I come from a constituency where about 60% of the population rents and lives in very poor, squalid housing situation, slums. The only way I can see that this particular community can be lifted out of that kind of poverty is through our own self-help initiative of paying for this particular project, putting in housing in those communities, therefore reducing slums. And by building houses, we're creating employment for our youth. Thousands and thousands of young people are going to be employed on those projects, which Mheshimiwa Mwengeni is not mentioning. The lack of unemployment is one of the poverty traps that we have in our community, in our country. Employment. We are also encouraging investors to come in, because the investors are coming to put these housing projects. They're going to provide jobs to the Jua Kali, and I have the largest Jua Kali in my constituency. They're going to get jobs for producing doors, windows, and other expertise. And it's not true that, in fact, some of these projects, like the Park Road project, was not supported by the artisans. A lot of the doors and the windows that were used in that particular project came from the Jua Kali sector. So I cannot understand when somebody says that this is coming from the Chinese or whatever else who is building it. We're changing the way we construct our houses, and I think we will employ more local people. We'll use more material, and it will stimulate our economy, and it will uplift many of the people in slum areas.
Thank you.
In our capital city, in our country.
Mheshimiwa, before I want us to take a short break, but I want us just to consider, as a matter of priority, if the housing projects is a good salutary effort from the government, the more pertinent issue that we do have as a country is the issue of power. The cost of energy is exorbitant, evidently, and you've just seen now that will be now spiking to 16% on fuel. Kenya, I was just reading one of the publication here, where Kenya in the world is actually the 8th, is slotted as the 8th, ranked the 8th in the contribution of 9 megawatts to its power grid. When we're talking about the geothermal energy, which has added the benefit of providing a baseload power, and the government is aiming also to reach a capacity of just over 1,600 megawatts through its Vision 2030 program. As part of this effort, we have also KenGen, the National Electricity Utility, which is developing the world's largest geothermal power plant, Olkaria 4, in Hell's Gates National Park. My question was, if this will stimulate the economy, why can't we navel gaze and concentrate on making sure that we put all our effort on geothermal power, so that we may reduce the cost of energy that is affecting the manufacturing sector, and that will have a cascading effect. People will leverage on that particular lowering down the cost of electricity. It will stimulate growth. It will stimulate also the economy for everyone to be benefiting out of this, because even the investors, they are greatly shy to invest in Kenya because of one, cost of power. Compared to housing projects, should we really consider maybe expending more energy on power than a housing project that can actually come after the geothermal energy has been tapped, and we have enough resources even to stimulate that housing project itself. Let's consider that as we take a short break. We circle back with more on the other side of the break.